Good evening, everyone. We're beginning this new portion. Miriam, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Brian and Richard in California, and I guess Jerry is either late or sleeping. As we get older, we need to sleep a little more. But tonight, I'm excited to look again into Vaera. This is the second parasha in the book of Exodus. And it paints a lot of pictures for not only what's going on now. That's why I love this book. I think Exodus is my favorite book. Well, maybe after Genesis. I'm not sure. I love them all, except for Leviticus. That one I have a rough time with. Okay, so let's go and take a look. Okay, everyone can see.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
good.
very small though. Small. Yeah.
Well, put it on your TV. Get a bigger picture.
Better now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Here we go. All right. So God spoke to Moses and said to him, Ani Yud He Vav He. I am Yud He Vav He. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but I did not make myself known to them by my name Yud He Vav He. Now, this idea here is not it's not that they never heard the name Yud He Vav He, because you'll read it in Genesis. But God reveals himself, aspects of his character throughout the scriptures. And El Shaddai, I've mentioned it to you before, the word shad means breast. So he was the nurturer. He was breastfeeding his creation. Now he's going to make himself known to Moses, not as he did to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as he was forming this nation. Now he was going to become the character of the Yud He Vav He, which is a God who exists always. He's the God of power, of action, of history, and he's going to reveal himself in that way to the people of Israel as well as to the people of Egypt, that at that time represents for us today the entire world. The Pharaoh of that day represents all the pharaohs of the world today, all the self-proclaimed gods, whatever area they make themselves into, become so proud that they cannot learn, that they cannot that they lord it over everyone else, and that whether it's politics or religion or medicine or philosophy, any of the what's the word of the systems that we have today. So that's what this is referring to. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, because remember, God has made several covenants. The first one we saw when he made the covenant of the rainbow, when he told us never again would he destroy the world with a flood. He made the covenant of the Brit Milah, the circumcision. But this covenant is to give the people the land of Canaan. There was so much evil in that land. All the people who were living there were going to be kicked out. The land in which they lived as sojourners, because remember, they came with Jacob. Joseph was sent with carriages and carts and camels to bring back to Egypt during the famine. They came with all their sons and all their families, and they came to Egypt. Now this new Pharaoh has arisen, who did not want to know Joseph, because he was no longer a foreign leader. He was an Egyptian natural born leader, and he didn't want any foreigners in his land. So here they're living as sojourners. We learned last week that they had multiplied, they were growing, they were becoming powerful, just like the Jews in America, like the Jews in Europe, before the last war. We go into this land, we become successful and prosperous and wealthy, and then the leaders of that land turn on us. This is a picture of everything we go through all through the ages. I have now heard the moaning of the Israelites, because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. We're waiting for this to happen again in the world. You can see the anti-Semitism that is on the rise, especially in Europe. It's beginning here in this country, but thank God we have right now a leader who is maybe for a while going to give us some respite. But again, if this leader makes money more important than the God of Israel, we're going to see changes. But this is like reading the modern newspapers to see what's going to be happening in the world today. Say therefore to the people of Israel. We read this every Pesach. I am Yud He Vav He. I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians, from the slavery, from the bondage of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from how they've put us into slavery, not only physically, but a slave mentality and a spiritual mentality to rely, spiritual slavery, to rely on the gods of Egypt instead of the only God. Remember, they had forgotten their God. They were living well in Egypt, and now they were in slavery and they had forgotten their God, which is why they're going to go through all this, not only to show Israel who their God is, because they had forgotten. They didn't have the remembrance of what Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had gone through. So now we're going to see them go through it, but also Egypt, again representing the world, are going to come to know who the only God of the universe, the Creator, is. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm through extraordinary, here it says chastisements, but here in the Hebrew it's judgments. God will judge the gods of the Egyptians, who the Israelites were entranced by. I will take you to be my people. We had forgotten he's our God, and we are his people right up until today. And that to me is the key for what Israel is going through. We have forgotten our God. And I will be your God. And you shall know that I, the Lord, Yud He Vav He, am your God who freed you from the labors, from the slavery of the Egyptian. This idea was important enough to be written in the very first commandment. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of captivity, out of bondage, out of slavery. We are to have no other gods. And here is the promise that he's given us. And the world can all scream and yell against Israel. You're in occupied territory. But God is saying, I will bring you into the land which I swore. What is this little star here? He says, I raised my hand, but it's an expression. When you raise your hand, you are giving an oath to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the God who does not break his promises. Yud He Vav He. When Moses told this to the Israelites, they would not listen to Moses. Their spirits were crushed by cruel slavery, bondage, captives. You know, I think when I read this, I think about what's going on in Israel today and the captivity of the hostages that were taken on October 7th and how their spirits are crushed. And yet, from time to time, you will hear of one who will say, I felt God was there with me. But most of the spirits of the people of Israel are crushed right now. And it's the only time in the history of our people, it's the only time when our spirits are crushed that we know that God is working in us to bring us back to Him, because our vision, our eyes, our attention has been on all kinds of other things other than being a light to the nations and to be obedient to His commandments. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go, depart from this land, from his land, the land of the Pharaoh." But Moses appealed to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, saying, "The Israelites would not listen to me." We saw that right back from when he was back in Egypt, and he tried in his own strength. Remember, he fought off an Egyptian guard and he killed him, who had been um, uh, hurting a Hebrew slave, but they wouldn't listen to him then. And so he felt, why would they listen to him now? How should Pharaoh heed me? Why would he listen to me? It says here, who gets tongue-tied? But the word, let's see what it says here with the little star, is uncircumcised of lips, which is not a claim to a permanent condition. It says here he's a man of impeded speech, and they compare it with Leviticus 19:23 and Jeremiah 6:10, which I'm not going to go into now, but this is something you can look at later. So just make a note a little later to look up Leviticus 19 and Jeremiah 6:10. Leviticus compares it to a tree that has not produced fruit in the first 3 to 5 years. So it's um, a temporary condition, but also uncircumcised lips. Let me see where I can find where I made some notes on that.
Isaiah, you had said, and right?
Isaiah, yeah, but that was more that, yeah, I think it was in Isaiah 6, but I looked that one up, and that was where God had, I, the angel took the coal from the ashes that were burnt and touched his lips, um, forgiving him because he was a man who said, "Who am I to speak?" And also in many ways like this, you're right, Miriam.
No, you had said that in your what's up app to me,
Yes,
and
I did.
was, yeah. So
I did. And when I looked it up, I was look I David Razon sent me his understanding about this. He said aral is the skin that covers over. It's the circumcision. So it's before the circumcision, the skin that covers over, so that when Moses said that he is a aral sfatayim, he means that he depicts his disability to speak as if his mouth was covered over by a piece of skin. Earlier, it was related to him, kaved lashon, heavy tongue. We must also pay attention to that in this sentence, there's several relations to hearing. It relates to hearing. Moses fears and questions how the people will hear him and how Pharaoh will hear him. There's a direct connection between speech and hearing. To sum up, Moses realizes his disadvantage, and as a leader, that should be the biggest virtue because, we listen to the leaders of the day and we make fun of those who cannot speak well in public. But those who are great orators, even if the things that they're saying are ridiculous, if they come across as a great orator, you think he's a good leader. But that's not what makes a good leader. And Moses never never looked at himself as a good leader. He always felt that he was what our rabbi used to call a reluctant leader. So, but God chose him in spite of this difficulty, in spite of his belief that he couldn't speak well. God believed that he would do his job with more effort because he would devote extra to it because he couldn't speak well. He would devote extra energy to being a good leader. And he continues with a combination between Aharon and Moshe might be harder and more difficult. Yet in the overall picture, God knows that he would be the better choice. And there's another one I read about that Rabbi Ben Herman on uncircumcised lips. He says, in life, there are plenty of things we wish we did not have, yet the fortunate person views them as gifts from God. Um, Here he says, when other kids were going to soccer practice or dance, I was going to speech lessons 2 or 3 days a week. I had trouble with many different letters. There were periods in my life when I thought I would never get the letters right, but I kept going, and eventually 3 days turned into two, then one, and finally zero. And at that stage in my life, I would never have imagined that I would be giving public speeches every week. I can send you this little article. It's a good one. So if you want to, just let me know. But this idea of uncircumcised lips, it's funny because for the last couple of months, I've been struggling with something in my mouth. And what goes on behind the scenes in my mind is that who am I to teach the Torah? Who am I to to speak in public when I don't have master's degrees, PhD degrees, but I do have a love for God, and I do have a lot of experience in the spiritual realm, and in the area where I believe God reveals himself to has revealed himself to me the way he did with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses, and the prophets. He does that with us today. And the things that we think are impediments to being a leader, God uses, believe it or not. English was one of my worst subjects in school, and here I am writing and speaking. So we never know, and it makes us not live it in the area of pride, but really it makes us humble that God would use us. So that's that. If you have any other ideas of uncircumcised lips, you can speak up or forever hold your peace.
Well, the first thing I thought, but I like all the explanations you're giving, is like when you're circumcised. Well, originally, it's to put you into a covenant. It's bring you into a covenant,
Right.
and it's like saying he's still young in all of this, and he doesn't really hasn't been in, like, even though he's had experiences with God, he's very young in it, and it's almost like, who am I? And this is so new to him.
Right.
Um, um,
Yeah,
and
because his first 40 years, he lived with the Egyptian gods, even though
right,
he knew where he came from. The second 40 years, he lived with the Midianite priests in the desert. These were all different gods that he was living in. He didn't know his God yet.
yeah. So I'm saying, who am I? He's saying, I'm, I'm so new in all of this.
Right. Even
Why are
though
they
he
going to
was
believe
80.
me? I've lived in Egypt, and I've been with the Pharaoh.
Right. Exactly. All right, let's go on. Verse 13. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses and Aaron about the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, instructing them to deliver the Israelites from the land of Egypt. So here Moses and Aaron both are hearing from God, telling them what they're going to have to do. And then it goes into the following are the heads of the respective clans. Um, because they were going to be speaking to the heads of these clans. So God obviously thinks it's important enough to know who they are. We know already Reuben was Jacob or Israel's firstborn. Enoch, let's see what it says, or Hanoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. Then we have the second born of Leah. Yemuel, Yamin, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, and Shaul, son of a Canaanite woman. These are the families of Simeon. These are the names of Levi, that's the third son by their lineage. Gershon, Kahat, and Merari. The span of Levi's life was 137. These would make up the priesthood, the Levites in Israel. And then there's the sons of Gershon. Gershon was the first son of Levi. Libni and Shimei by their families. Kohat was the second son of Levi. Amram, who is the father of Moses. Ishar, Hebron, and Hebron is a descendant of Caleb, believe it or not. They say, hang on a second, where did I read that? But anyway, I'll go into that another time. But Amram is the father of Moses. And Hebron, they cannot say that we don't have claim to the land of Hebron today. Uziel, the span of Kohat's life was 133 years. The sons of Merari, the third son of Levite, of Levi, Machli and Mushi. These are the families of the Levites by their lineage. Amram married his father's sister Yocheved. That was Moses' mother. That was he married his auntie, but she must have been quite young because we know they had many children. And they were later, they were had birth later, so they were younger, I think. I didn't look into this to tell you the truth, so don't quote me. If you're interested, look it up. But I thought it's funny because I think of, marrying my aunt. They were altas already. But she bore him Aaron and Moses, and the span of Amram's life was 137 years. So he got to see a lot of what went on. The son of Ishar was Korach, Nepheg, and Zichri. So we see Korach was a cousin of Moses, and we know later on we're going to read all the problems he had with his cousin, who was jealous of his position. The sons of Uziel, Mishael, Eltzaphan, and Sithri. Aaron married Elisheva, the daughter of Aminadab and the sister of Nachshon, and she bore him Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Itamar. The sons of Korach, Asir, Elkanah. We heard later on, we're going to read that Korach ended up dying along with his whole family, but obviously it wasn't because Elkanah went on and lived. These are the family of the Korathites. Aaron's son, Eleazar, married one of Putiel's daughters, and she bore him Pinchas, one of the heroes of Israel. Those are the heads of the ancestral houses of the Levites by their families. It is the same Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, "Bring forth the Israelites from the land of Egypt, troop by troop." It is they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to free the Israelites from the Egyptians. These are the same Moses and Aaron. So it's like we took a break to read who the families were, and then we're going back to the story. I don't always understand why God puts things in certain places, but it either the Torah, as Rabbi used to say, is not chronological, but gives us ideas. And I didn't delve into that idea, although there's always more room to study the Torah, and you can take it as deep as you want. But basically, the main principles are always revealed to us for us to know how to live the principles for our lives today. And that's what we're searching for in this little study that we do. It is Moses and Aaron who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, telling him to free the Israelites from Egypt. These are the same Moses and Aaron. Why he would say that, I don't know. But he's repeating that we have to remember that these are the heroes, the ones who went against, who really thought that they were no ones. And they were slaves. And they went up against the king, the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So we're never to be afraid to stand up and take our roles. God will always be with us. For when Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, "I am Yud He Vav He. Boy, I wish I knew how to pronounce it. Yahweh, Yehovah, I don't know. I would love to know. Maybe God will speak to me one day and tell me how to pronounce it. Even though we're told not to pronounce it, but we're told not to say his name in vain. It's not that we cannot say the name. I am Yudhevave. Speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I tell you, all that I will tell you. Moses appealed to God, to Yudhevave, saying, look, I get, here again, Aral Sfatayim. I am a man of uncircumcised lips. How will Pharaoh heed me? Who am I to speak to him? God replied to Moses, look, I'm putting you in the position, in the role of God to Pharaoh. You are going to be my messenger. You are my ambassador, and the ambassador of any nation is given the right to speak for the leader of that nation to another nation. And here, Moses is going to be in the place of a God to Pharaoh, with your brother Aaron as your prophet. The prophet is the one who speaks also in the name of God. We compare it with verse 4:16. So he was told, don't be afraid. I am with you. You shall repeat all that I command you. And your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh to let the Israelites depart from his land. And we're going to see back and forth that the two of them were together, that sometimes it's Moses who speaks and sometimes it's Aaron who speaks, because Moses was afraid he wouldn't be able to do it on his own. Aaron was brought to him. Remember, Aaron was able to leave Egypt and come to Midian, and together they went back with Zipporah and the boys. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that I may multiply my signs and marvels in the land of Egypt. So it's not that at the beginning we will see that Pharaoh had a choice to listen, but because of his own stubborn pride and thinking that he's God, and who is this God? I don't know this God. And there's a lot of people like that today. Who is that God better than our gods? In India, we have 1,000,000 gods. In other places in the world, there's so many gods. We have a God for everything. Who is this one God who we can't see and we can't touch? When Pharaoh does not listen to you, I will lay my hand upon Egypt and I will bring out the people. I will deliver my ranks, my people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt with extraordinary judgments, great judgments. These are the plagues. And to tell you the truth, I believe that that's what's happening in the world today. We're seeing plagues hit the planet. I believe even the fires in California are part of that plague. There are different reasons for it. But when we shake a fist at God anywhere in the world, we are going to experience the plagues that hit Egypt then. And the Egyptians shall know that I am Yud-He-Vav-He. This is like a picture in the future when all the nations shall know, all the nations in the world, every single one. We read before that they were represented by 70 nations. All the nations in the world shall know that I am Yud-He-Vav-He when I stretch out my hand over Egypt and bring the Israelites from their midst. Right now, many of us, those who are living as Jews, there are even Gentiles who are living as Jews with our people, believing in our God, who are still living amongst the nations. We're living in Canada. Richard, you're living in South America, in the United States. There are Jews living all over the world, and one day we will be all brought back, all lifted up and brought back to Israel. Some are going now on their own. And to tell you the truth, I often think about it. Am I being called to go back to Israel? And I believe if my heart is open, God will show me when and where to go. But God will bring all the Israelites from foreign lands back to the land where He gave us. And then we will fulfill our role of being a light to all the nations. This Moses and Aaron did, as the Lord commanded them, so they did. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 when they made their demand on Pharaoh. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh speaks to you and says, do your thing, produce the word is mofet, wonders, tanu, produce, do your wonders, you shall say, like Pharaoh saying to them, yeah, do your best. Show me what you got. You shall say to Aaron. Remember, here he's taking the rod, but we had already read that God showed Moses. Remember when Moses didn't believe him? Who shall I say sent me? God said, take your rod, throw it on the ground. And it became a snake. And he said, and then again, he had to show the elders. When he went to the elders, he did the same thing again. Now, this is the third time. And the third time, he's telling Aaron, take the rod. It was Aaron who did it in front of Pharaoh, not Moses, as it depicts in the movies. Aaron did it. That's why it's important for us to read what the Torah says, because if we can change the smallest of details, we can change anything. And God tells us, do not add and do not take away from my word. There are consequences for that. Take your rod, cast it down before Pharaoh. It shall turn into a serpent. So Moses and Aaron came before Pharaoh and did just as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had commanded. Aaron cast down his rod in the presence of Pharaoh and his courtiers, and it turned into a serpent. Now, it says here he cast down his rod. Does he mean the rod of Moses? Does he mean the rod of Aaron? To me, at this particular juncture, I only remember one rod, the rod that Moses had. So Aaron, to me, this is saying Aaron cast down Moses's rod, but really it belonged to God. God was in control of the rod, no matter who it belonged to. So he cast down his rod in the presence of Pharaoh and those who surrounded him, all his court, and it turned into a serpent. But the Pharaoh summoned his wise people and his sorcerers. There are prophets who can do things in the name of their gods. I don't know how. Maybe, I guess God allows it. And the Egyptian magician priests, Miriam and I, we saw lots of things in the New Age. They did the same with their spells. There are spells and potions. So we have to be careful in whose name we're doing things. Each cast down his rod and they turned into serpents. But here, Aaron's rod swallowed their rod. So again, it's not who owned the rod, but who was using it in the moment. Yet Pharaoh's heart became even stronger. It says here, Vayazek, Chazek, at the end of we read a book, Chazak. Here, he strengthened his will, he became more prideful, and he didn't listen to them. Just as God had said that he would. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, Pharaoh is stubborn. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he's coming out to the water and station yourself before him at the edge of the Nile, taking with you the rod that turned into a snake. So Pharaoh, I was looking at this with a friend of mine, And we were wondering where, because the palace where Pharaoh lived was obviously right next to the water. He was coming out to the water, which would be the Nile. He stationed himself by the edge of the Nile. We were wondering, where was this palace? Was it in Ramses? How far was Goshen, where the Jews lived, where the Israelites lived? Because it would have been a while, because Miriam, if she and her mom were living in Goshen, and they had to bring the baby to the reeds outside the palace of the Nile, how far was that? That's a whole other story, and I never really looked into it. But from one of the sites said it could have been 100 miles, but I can't imagine it was that far. But the area of Goshen, if you look up the maps of where Goshen was, very fertile land for the animals where they were grazing. But that's another story. There's so many places that this can take you. So go to Pharaoh in the morning as he's coming out to the water, and station yourself before him at the edge of the Nile, taking with you the rod that turned into a snake, and say to him, the Lord, the God of Hebrews, sent me to you to say. Here they were coming to him right at his palace, right at the place where he was held the highest. They weren't afraid. Or maybe they were, I don't know, but God is showing the Pharaoh that you can be wherever you are. There's no place that's sacred or holy. We're going to reach you. Let my people go so that they may worship me in the wilderness, that they can bow down and do their offerings to me in the wilderness. But you have paid no heed right unto now. Thus says Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, by this you shall know that I am the God who is your protector, your savior, your deliverer, your shield. I am the one who's taking care of you. I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Look, I'm going to strike the water in the Nile with the rod that's in my hand, and it will be turned into blood, and the fish in the Nile will die. The Nile was a god, the way the Ganges is a god in Israel. You'll see, in India. You'll see that. The Nile will stink. Your gods mean nothing. So that the Egyptians will find it impossible to drink the water of the Nile. Here he was, the god of the Nile, going down to the Nile, maybe to pray, not only to wash, but to, who knows what he was doing there. But he was filling himself up with the pride of being the God who created the Nile. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your rod, hold out your arm over the waters of Egypt, its rivers, its canals, its ponds, its lakes, all its bodies of waters. And when you look at a map, there's lakes everywhere, that they may turn to blood. There shall be blood throughout the land of Egypt, even in vessels of wood and stone. That's why Egypt didn't suffer the famine the way the other nations did, because they had so much water, and their wealth was great because water brings life to the land. That's why the Israelites were there in the first place. They left Canaan. In Canaan, they didn't have the water of Egypt. Canaan, they had to rely on God for the rains. Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded. He lifted up the rod, struck the water in the Nile in the sight of Pharaoh and all his court, and all the water in the Nile was turned into blood, and the fish in the Nile died. The Nile stank so that the Egyptians couldn't drink water from the Nile, and there was blood throughout the land of Egypt. But when the Egyptian magician priests did the same with their spells, Pharaoh's heart became harder, and he didn't heed them, as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had spoken would happen. Pharaoh turned and went into his palace, paying no regard even to this. with the magicians, they could have turned some water that they had, let's say, in a vessel. Who knows? They knew chemicals, that there were things that they knew how to do, but it was temporary. But he turned around, he didn't pay attention anymore. And all the Egyptians had to dig around the Nile for drinking water, because they could not drink the water of the Nile. It doesn't say here that the Egyptians had to drink, but we're going to see a little later that these first 3 plagues were also experienced by the Hebrews in Goshen. They would have to dig. They would go under the ground, just the way we dig a well today, or the way they dug wells then. That's how they got their water. But the Israelites would also have experienced this, because the first 3 weren't as bad as the last 6. So they went through this for 7 days. When 7 days had passed, imagine 7 days of having to deal with this blood and the smell. It was horrible. It struck the Nile, and everybody would begin to wonder what was going on. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, thus says Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, let my people go, that they may worship me, that they may bring an offering to me. If you refuse to let them go, I will plague your whole country with frogs." Now, this seems to be a natural event in nature. If a lake or a river filled with frogs is poisoned and stinks, the frogs will naturally jump out. So the Nile shall swarm with frogs, and they shall come up and enter your palace, your bedchamber, your bed, the houses of all those in your courts, and your people, your ovens, and your kneading bowls. The frogs shall come up on you and on your people and on all your court. And the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, hold out your arm with a rod over the river, over the canals, over the ponds, and bring the frogs onto the land of Egypt. So it's all done. To me, it's always not necessarily what is happening, but the timing of it is in God's hands. When he held out his arm, that's when the frogs would come out. Not that they were being pushed out by by being 7 days, because it said they were 7 days with the blood. So to me, the frogs would have jumped out immediately. But here, after 7 days, they were coming out, and they covered the land of Egypt, including the land of Goshen. But the magician priest did the same with their spells and brought frogs upon the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, plead with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to remove the frogs from me and my people, and I will let the people go to sacrifice to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He was acknowledging Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and that they would bring a zebach, an offering to this God. Moses said to Pharaoh, you may have triumph over me. For what time shall I plead in behalf of you and your courtiers and your frogs, that the frogs be and your people, that the frogs be cut off from you and your houses, to remain only in the Nile? I don't understand this. Hold on. Moses, you may have this triumph over me. For what time shall I plead on behalf of you and your courtiers? For tomorrow, here, let's continue. For tomorrow, he replied. And Moses said, as you say, that you may know that there is none like our God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. The frog shall retreat from you, and your court and your people, they shall remain only in the Nile. Then Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh's presence, and Moses cried out to God in the matter of the frogs which had been inflicted upon Pharaoh. And the Lord did as Moses asked. The frogs died out in the houses, the courtyards, and the field, and they piled them up in heaps till the land stank. When Pharaoh saw that there was relief, again, he became stubborn and would not heed them. He would not surrender.
It's
As the Lord,
interesting
yeah,
when we have issues in our life. I mean, many of us, many people, you know, suddenly our belief supposedly in God is strong, and you say, "Oh, I promise you, God, I will always believe in you, and I know that you're the creator." Blah blah blah. Then, as soon as things get better, we forget about it.
totally. I know. That's our human nature. That's
Yeah,
why it takes sometimes in our lives, a little plague comes along.
yeah,
We become really sick with something. Um, Something happens to humble us. And then we know
yeah.
we got to give in. We got to let go. It's like when I eat chocolate and I know I get a reaction. And then next time so I stay away for a few days and then I'm feeling well again. Let me try now. I get the same reaction. But I don't want to admit it because I love the chocolate so much. I mean, that's a silly little example, but that's who we are. We forget. That's why God keeps repeating things over and over. We're like children. He calls us the children of Israel. We forget so easily. We have a nature. Unbelievable how strong our nature is. And He made us that way. Then the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, hold out your rod and strike the dust of the earth, and it shall turn to lice throughout the land of Egypt. That includes Goshen. And we're going to see later how this changes. This is the first three. And they did so, and Aaron held out his arm with the rod and struck the dust of the earth, and vermin, lice came upon, or flies. I think after the frogs came flies. They were everywhere. Ooh, but they're not. They're annoying, but they won't kill you.
Are you
Flies,
saying that these plagues, the first ones, did happen in Goshen,
yes.
but you don't see any complaint or suffering it didn't, you don't hear talk of it?
No, but wait, you're going to see soon.
Because I forget okay.
And then you'll see all the dust of the earth turned to lice throughout the land of Egypt, or flies. But the magician priests did the same with their spells to produce flies, but they could not. These pests remained upon human and beast. The magician priest said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. Oh, wait a minute. Did we do the first three? We had this one here. Is this the third one or the
I
second one?
think it's there's the frogs, there's
There's the blood first,
the blood.
then the frogs, and then the flies. Now this one is the fourth. This is
No,
the
but here they couldn't, here it says they couldn't hold it in a, no, it's the priests, the magicians couldn't do this one.
magicians couldn't do this one.
So this is the fourth, I think. First is there's blood, there's
Frogs,
frogs.
flies, and now there's lice. Now the lice burnt.
They
Bit.
couldn't do it.
Yeah, they couldn't do it. This is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart stiffened and he would not heed them. No, this is the finger of God. But no, this is the third because it still affected Goshen.
I thought, oh,
Let's go. Let's continue.
okay, all
You'll
right.
see. Then the Lord said to Moses, early in the morning, present yourself to Pharaoh as he is coming out to the water, and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go so that they may worship me. For if you do not let my people go, I will let loose swarms of insects, or here some say wild beasts, against you and your court and your people and your houses and the houses of the Egyptians. The very ground they stand on shall be filled with swarms of flies. But on that day I will set apart the region of Goshen, where my people dwell, so that no swarm of insects shall be there, that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. You see, he didn't say that with the first three.
Okay, I guess
Our people also had to go through some of these things, but he didn't allow them to go through the worst. The first three were basically harmless. They were annoying, but they were at that level harmless. Like the next ones would increase in the harm done to the people.
well, God uses what's already there. Like
Right.
people knew that there are a lot of frogs. I'm sure they're swarming with frogs normally, except they don't leave the Nile in such quantities.
Right.
Same with the flies and all these things. So maybe that's why also. It's an exaggeration of what always happens anyways.
Exactly.
God uses nature.
God uses what he has already created.
Right, right.
Yeah, this is why we say these natural phenomena that are going on, that have always gone on, we don't attribute them to God because we say it's nature. That's why people don't believe. And I will make a distinction. Let's see what it says here. Pedut, the word is pedut, which is a meaning uncertain, between my people and your people. Tomorrow, this sign, ot, shall come to pass. And it's going to be a sign of God's greatness. And Yud He Vav He did so. Heavy swarms of insects invaded Pharaoh's palace and the houses of his court. Throughout the country of Egypt, the land was ruined because of the swarms of insects. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Go, sacrifice to your God within the land." He didn't want to let him go within the land. But Moses replied, "It would not be right to do this. For what we sacrifice to our God, which is the sheep, was a god to Egypt. It's untouchable to the Egyptians. That's why the Egyptians would not eat with the Hebrews who lived in Goshen, because their sheep were like the cows in India today. They were considered gods. If we sacrifice what is untouchable to the Egyptians before their very eyes, won't they stone us? So we must go a distance of at least 3 days into the wilderness to make offerings to our God, as our God has commanded us. God is the one who's taking us out there, who's telling us what to do. Because sacrifices were not foreign. They were sacrificing to the gods of Egypt. There was all kinds of sacrifices. But now he was going to start to turn our attention away from the gods to him. So he didn't take away the sacrifices now. Those would be taken away later. Pharaoh said, that's why in many ways I don't believe. I know that in Israel now they're preparing to rebuild a temple with all their sacrifices, but the sacrificial system is over as far as the Torah is concerned, from what we have learned. Pharaoh said, "I will let you go to sacrifice to your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, in the wilderness, but don't go very far. But plead then for me." It looks like he's humbling himself, but he isn't. Moses said, "When I leave your presence, I will plead with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, that the swarm of insects depart tomorrow from Pharaoh and his court and his people. But Pharaoh, don't act deceitfully again by not letting us go to sacrifice to our Lord." He's being forewarned. So Moses left Pharaoh's presence and pleaded with God. And God did as Moses asked, and he removed the swarms of insects from Pharaoh, from his court, and from his people. Not one remained. That itself is a sign. Amazing. I don't know how he did it. But Pharaoh became stubborn this time also, and would not let the people go. So the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of the Hebrews, says, let my people go to worship me. Shalach Ivrim, Shalach et Ami, my people, let's see what this word is. To serve me, to do work. You see, we say worship, but the word is not yishtachaveh. It's from avad, avdi, my servant. And what does a servant do? He works for God. The word worship used to be in Old English workmanship, and that's how we worship God, in the things that we do. That's really important to note. It's not like praying hours on end and, oh Lord, I worship you. No, we do. That's how we serve him, how we obey him. For if you refuse to let them go and continue to hold them captive, then the hand of God will strike your livestock in the fields, the horses, the asses, the donkeys, the cattle, the camels, the cattle, and the sheep, with a very severe pestilence. Now remember this here, because a little later on, here it says that the livestock are going to be destroyed. The hand will strike your livestock. But later on, we're going to see something that was brought to my attention again by Cindy. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the the livestock of the Egyptians. Again, he's telling us there's a difference. The livestock there in Goshen will not be touched, but the livestock of the Egyptians will be, so that nothing shall die of all that belongs to the Israelites. This is a miracle. God has fixed the time. Remember, it's timing. Tomorrow, the Lord will do this thing in the land. And the Lord did so. The next day, all the livestock of the Egyptians died, but of the livestock of the Israelites, not a beast died. When Pharaoh inquired, and Pharaoh looked into the situation, and he found that not a head of the livestock of Israel had died, still Pharaoh remained stubborn. He would not let the people go. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, each of you take handfuls of soot from the kiln, and let Moses throw it in the sky in sight of Pharaoh. It shall be a fine dust all over Egypt, and cause an inflammation breaking out in boils on human and beast throughout the land of Egypt. But weren't the beasts just destroyed? And they took the soot of the
Yeah,
kiln.
but that's true.
Yeah, wait, well, let's go continue. Then they took the soot of the kiln and appeared before Pharaoh, and Moses threw it up in the sky, and it caused an inflammation breaking out in boils on human and beast. And the magician priests were unable to confront Moses because of the inflammation, for the inflammation afflicted the magicians themselves,
Maybe
as
it
well
was
as
their pet dogs that were the beasts.
maybe, or the bunny rabbits. But the Lord stiffened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had told Moses. Then early in the morning, present yourself to Pharaoh, Moses was told by God, and say to him, thus says the Lord, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go to serve me. For this time I will send all my plagues upon your person and your court and your people, in order that you may know that there is none like me in all the world. I could have stretched forth my hand and stricken you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been wiped out from the face of the earth. And it's true. God could have wiped out all the Egyptians in one moment. But here he's putting them through 10 plagues. Nevertheless, I have spared you for this purpose, in order to show you my power, and in order that I don't like how it says my fame, because the word in Hebrew is shmi, my name. My name may resound throughout the world. God's not looking to be famous. This is not about fame, it's about who he is. What are the characteristics of the God of Israel? Yet you continue to, here it says, thwart, here it says, exalt yourself exalt yourself over the people, and do not let them go. This time tomorrow, I will rain such a heavy hail, such as not has been in Egypt from the day it was founded until today. And look at it says there, therefore, order your livestock and everything you have in the open brought under shelter. Every human and beast that is found outside, not having been brought indoors, shall perish when the hail comes down upon them.
What do you think this means?
Well, one of the things I discussed, because Cindy called me and asked me about this, and she said, isn't it possible that when the Pharaoh saw the livestock of the Hebrews who were still his slaves, he took them? And that makes perfect sense to me,
It could
because
be, or it could be also, sometimes it's a principle of, when he says, I'm going to strike down all your beasts. Maybe it's not, maybe they had huge herds and they were left with very little. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't literally every single last one.
that makes less sense to me than her explanation. But,
Anyway, I don't know.
the Torah leaves us open to think. And it says that everything was destroyed. It said it, all, kol.
Okay.
So here, but remember, everything in Egypt still belonged to Pharaoh. And then that was set up by Joseph, remember?
Yeah.
During all that time, all the time that people would come to him. First, he took everything that belonged to them. So all their livestock really considered belonging to Pharaoh. But here it says, there were those among Pharaoh's court who feared Yud He Vav He's word. It says, Ha Yare et Daber Yud He Vav He Adonai. So there were people among the Pharaoh's court who were starting to fear God's word. And they brought their slaves and their livestock indoors to safety. But those who paid no regard of the word of the Lord left their slaves and livestock out in the open. And this is what happens when we don't obey God's word. It's us. We don't do what God warns us to do. And then we suffer the consequences and we blame him. He tells us what not to do. We do it and we blame him. That's the mentality of humanity. The Lord said to Moses, hold out your arm toward the sky, that hail may fall upon the land of Egypt, all the land, upon human and beast, and all the grasses of the field in the land of Egypt. But remember, Goshen was at this point separated. So Moses held out his rod toward the sky, and God sent thunder and hail, and fire streamed down to the ground. I've seen pictures of hail like this, even in modern day times, as the Lord rained down hail upon the land of Egypt. It was so heavy, fire flashing in the midst of the hail, such has not fallen in the land of Egypt since it had become a nation.
Have you seen fire in the midst? Like,
Yes.
so it's electrically.
Just go to YouTube and look it up. Fire
No,
and
I
hail.
believe so it must be like electrical
Like
charges.
lightning.
Huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You know what I saw the other day, which amazed me? I was listening to uh, a talk about energy and the mitochondria. When the sperm of a male reaches the egg of the female, there is a flash of light in that moment.
Wow.
They have witnessed this. That's how we know that the spark of life is is
That's
created at conception,
right.
at the moment that
Wow, that's fascinating.
it was amazing. Throughout the land of Egypt, the hail struck down all that were in the open, both human and beast. The hail struck down all the grasses of the field and shattered all the trees of the field. Only in the region of Goshen, where the Israelites were, there was no hail. You know, today when I pray, when I'm looking at all these things that are going on in the world, and we think, where is there to run today? Today, to me, it's a spiritual Goshen. Today, we have to seek refuge in the under the covering of Yud He Vav He, who protects us in ways that are awesome, really. And I've seen it in my life. Thereupon Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron and said to them, I'm guilty this time. Yud He, your God is right. He's in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Plead with Yud He Vav He that there may be an end of God's thunder and lightning and hail. I will let you go. You need to stay no longer. Huh. Let's see what he says. Moses said to him, As I go out of the city, I will spread out my hands to the Lord, and the thunder will cease, and the hail will fall no more, so that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. But I know that you and your court do not yet fear God. Yud He Vav He. But the flax and the barley were ruined, for the barley was in the ear and the flax was in the bud. But the wheat, and here it says emer, but it's another type of wheat. Maybe it was spelt. There were different types of wheats. But the wheat and the emer were not hurt, for they ripened later on. Leaving Pharaoh, Moses went outside the city. It looks like he went alone. And he spread out his hands to the heavens, to the Yud He Vav He. The thunder and the hail ceased, and no rain came pouring down upon the earth. But when Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, he became stubborn again, and he turned back to his ways, his old ways of guilt, sin, whatever it was. The word here was chata'ah, as did his courtiers. So Pharaoh's heart stiffened. It became even harder. Again, chazak. He would not let the Israelites go, just as God had foretold through Moses. God knows us. He knows our thoughts. He knows our hearts. He knows absolutely everything about us, which is hard to understand, hard to believe, but it's just a fact. And when we allow ourselves to be humbled and don't hold on to, there's areas of our life where we think we know. We know this is the way I am and I can't change. There's nothing I can do about it. It's not true. God is the one who can help us. He helps us get out of addictions. He helps us to see. He opens our eyes. He opens our ears. He opens our heart. We just really need to come to him and talk to him and ask him. Not only Moses spoke to God, not only the prophets heard from God, we do today. There's times things have come out of my mouth, and Miriam, you'd say to me, "Oh, that's a prophecy," or Peggy the prophetess, and things you've told me, and my heart is hard in that moment, and I don't believe you. And I've been getting a lot of that lately. Miriam, you were right. I don't know everything. Who do I think I am to know everything? Only God knows everything. And that's the blessing of knowing him. The amazing thing is that who am I to be known by the God of the universe? Isn't that awesome? Who
That's the
are
whole,
we?
each one of us. It's such an incredible, like it's almost too good to be true, but it is.
I know. I mean, President Trump doesn't know me. But the God, the creator of the universe, who created President Trump, knows us.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
What did you just said something? I just find it absolutely fascinating. You said mitochondrial studies of the union of the egg. And you mean they caught? How did they catch that?
It
I
was a
guess.
flash of light. It
So
shows
you
it
mean when it actually takes, so to speak, that's
when it
when.
actually, when there's a union of the
Wow.
sperm and
Where
the
did you
egg.
hear that? Like that's
I should have sent it to you immediately. Sometimes I see things
oh
and
my God. It's
I
a
know
scientific thing that
it's a
they,
scientific thing,
it's
scientific proof.
almost like God's hand. He's creating what that union is going to become, what the child, like more and more I'm thinking about when a live baby comes out, it's another human being. It's unbelievable.
I
Oh,
know.
Brian, there's Brian.
Yes, Brian.
Wants male and female. Don't want those other things.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I loved hearing from President Trump. To tell you the truth, I don't like everything that he's doing, but I like a lot of what he's doing. And one of the things that they're saying right there up on the stage, there's only male and female. And that's not popular today. Yes, Brian.
I was looking in so-called Facebook, and one of those people sent me in my Facebook posing in a bikini. Good-looking lady, you know.
Okay.
Uh,
She
but
sent it to you on Facebook?
I saw her on my Facebook, but I don't
And
see.
and and what does she want? She wants to marry you?
Must get friendly or something.
Just be careful of pictures that are sent to you because you end up seeing something very different.
Well,
That's
this
what
is
I don't like. One of the
it doesn't
things
look
that,
like an avatar. It's her. I can see
okay,
it.
okay. But one of the things that I don't like about what's being pushed today is the agenda of artificial intelligence.
Come see me. If she lives
And
here,
and
she
that's
can come see
that's
me.
a very big part of this war that we're in is AI. We use it. Every time I do a search for something, artificial intelligence is the new Encyclopedia Britannica. Pardon?
She's not bad looking from there.
Yeah, I know, Brian. Yeah, I know you're very interested in the woman with the bikini, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Okay? I'm talking about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And this AI is they're looking to replace humans.
Scared.
So it's very frightening. And
It's supposed to be scary when like that movie I, Robot. We're
yes,
gonna have fake armies obliterating. Who knows? You can gather an army of robots and destroy another country and not lose one soldier.
exactly. Exactly. So it'll be interesting to watch the days ahead to see what God is going to do. I believe with President Trump, he's given us a reprieve. There will be some prosperity that we go through. I don't know if this is the 7 years of prosperity before the end. I don't know. Timing is not in our hands. Timing is God's hands, is in God's hands. But all we can do is as it says in the Lord of the Rings, is do the best with the time that we've been given, you know, and really worshiping God is serving others, is serving, is loving our neighbor as we love ourselves, and loving the God of the only God, the creator of the universe. Every other God is false. So when people put themselves up as knowing everything, run away. You know, there's so much more we can say, but I love these portions because they give me hope. They give me hope for
Yeah.
the future. When we sometimes we look at the news and we look at what's going on, we can lose sight of that. So if that's all there is that all there is?
You did more than you did usually when what's his name is on. We did more than that today. You were on longer than usual.
Yes, I was reading a little slower today. Um, uh, yeah, we had less people speaking, I guess. I don't know, but we were on a little longer, which is fine. So I want to wish you all a wonderful rest of your week. Remember, Serving God is loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. It's important to learn to love ourselves. And how do we love? We treat ourselves well. We take care of ourselves. We take care of others. So, on that note, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom
That's
and,
all.
and look forward to the rest of the week and seeing you on Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye.